Okay, let's dive right into a topic that, well, it's absolutely foundational, but maybe a bit confusing sometimes for people.
Yeah.
Setting up an effective worming protocol for puppies.
It's such a critical one. And for this deep dive, we've pulled together insights, really practical stuff, leaning on a specific protocol shared by, folks who've actually done this successfully for years.
Exactly. So our goal today, our mission, is really to unpack all of that, pull out the absolute must-know info, and give you a clear roadmap.
Mm.
Whether you're getting a new puppy, you're a breeder, maybe you work in rescue, getting this right cuts through a lot of the confusion. It's just essential for a healthy start.
So let's kick off with something the sources really hammer home, a core biological fact. Puppies are, well, they're basically born with parasites.
Born with them. Wow.
Yeah, it's not really a maybe. It's more like the default setting for most, specifically things like roundworms and hookworms. They can pass from the mother through the placenta even before birth, and then later through her milk.
So right from day one, they're dealing with this challenge. And the sources, they make it clear this isn't just some small thing, right?
Not at all. These parasites are serious business. They literally steal vital nutrients that a tiny growing puppy desperately needs.
Okay.
They can lead to anemia, they mess with the immune system development right when it's most critical, and, in really bad cases, a heavy load can actually be fatal.
Fatal. That really puts it in perspective.
It does, and that's why delaying or skipping that early deworming means you're playing catch-up right away.
Right.
And here's another really key point from the material. A puppy can look perfectly fine, totally healthy on the outside.
Even if they have worms.
Exactly. Even while carrying a pretty significant internal parasite burden. So you just can't wait for visible signs like, a pot belly or slow growth before you start taking action.
Okay, so that tells us we need a plan. A proactive, structured approach is the way to go. So, given that reality born with them look normal, how do the experienced folks handle this? The sources seem to lay out a specific timeline, almost like layers of defense.
That's a good way to put it. It starts surprisingly early, right at 2 weeks old.
2 weeks, okay.
Yeah, the recommendation is to begin with Pyrantel 5% liquid solution. It's
Yeah.
known for being quite gentle, and it specifically targets those really common first invaders, the roundworms and hookworms.
Got it. So hit the ones you know are probably there right from the get-go.
Precisely. And then you repeat that Pyrantel dose. You do it again at 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and 8 weeks.
Okay, so every 2 weeks for that first stretch.
Right. The idea is to keep knocking down that initial parasite population during that super fast growth period. Keep the load low.
Makes sense. Then what?
Then, around 10 weeks, there's a strategic switch in medication. The protocol moves to Fenbendazole liquid dewormer.
Fenbendazole.
Okay. And this part's important. It's given for 3 consecutive days, both at the 10-week mark, and then again 3 days in a row at the 12-week mark.
3 days straight. Why the switch and the multi-dosing there?
Well, the sources explain this really broadens the coverage. Fenbendazole hits a wider range of parasites that Pyrantel doesn't really cover, specifically things like Giardia and whipworms.
Ah, okay. Different targets.
Exactly. And that multi-day dose, that's often needed to be fully effective against some of the tougher ones like Giardia. It's like building that next stronger layer of protection.
Okay, building up the defense. Broader coverage coming in. What happens after 12 weeks?
So at 14 weeks, there's what you might call a cleanup step.
Cleanup.
Yeah, the recommendation is a single dose of albendazole, 11.36%. Think of it as catching anything else that might still be hanging around after those earlier treatments.
A final sweep? Sort of?
Kind of, yeah, before moving to the next phase.
And what's that next phase after the 14-week cleanup?
That's when you transition into more of a maintenance routine, usually starting around 16 weeks and then ongoing, typically monthly.
Monthly, okay.
And the suggestion here is to use a broad-spectrum product. The source mentions MoxiGuard Plus as an example. These often cover not just internal parasites, but might include heartworm prevention, even external stuff like fleas, depending on the specific product you choose.
Right. That makes sense as they get older and are, more exposed to the outside world.
Exactly. What's really interesting about this whole schedule, though, is the focus on switching products. The sources really seem to stress that just using the same dewormer over and over is a bad idea.
Oh, absolutely. It's a major pitfall. They emphasize that parasites, kind of like bacteria with antibiotics, can develop resistance.
Right, resistance.
If you keep hitting them with the exact same chemical compound, the only ones that survive are the ones that happen to be resistant to it. And guess what?
Yeah.
They're the ones that reproduce.
And then the drug stops working. Precisely. That's how you can end up in tricky situations where, puppies are clearly sick, but the standard dewormers aren't effective anymore. Maybe even fecal tests come back negative because the resistant strain isn't the typical one, or there aren't enough eggs to show up easily.
So this whole layered approach using different chemicals.
It's designed specifically to combat that resistance issue, keep the parasites guessing, essentially.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's maybe break down these specific products mentioned a bit more. What exactly does each one do in this system?
Sure. So we start with that Pyrantel 5% liquid. Think of that as the gentle opening move,
Right.
effective against those common roundworms and hookworms that you pretty much expect to be there right at the start.
Okay. Then the Fenbendazole liquid. That was the multi-day workhorse you mentioned.
Yeah, the workhorse for hitting Giardia and whipworms, used at 10 and 12 weeks for those 3 days each time.
Got it. And Albendazole, 11.36%.
That's that single dose at 14 weeks.
Yep.
The cleanup crew, the final pass before you shift to maintenance mode.
Okay. Now, there was another one mentioned specifically, Toltrazuril liquid solution. What's its role? Why is it separate?
Ah, yes. This is really crucial because, as the material points out, Toltrazuril is specifically for Coccidia.
Coccidia.
Not worms.
Correct. Coccidia are not worms at all. They're microscopic single-celled parasites, protozoa. And your standard wormers, they don't touch Coccidia.
Oh, okay. Good to know. So if Coccidia is suspected, maybe based on symptoms or confirmed with a test, Toltrazuril is the go-to treatment. The source mentions a typical dose is 10 milligram per kilogram for 2 days, and it's noted as being very effective against it.
So it's a reminder that not every tummy issue in a puppy is caused by worms. There are other critters.
Exactly. Different parasites need different treatments.
And then finally, MoxiGuard Plus was the example given for that broader monthly maintenance starting around 16 weeks.
Right. And the sources also mentioned that these particular products were highlighted partly because they tend to be pretty accessible, relatively easy to dose correctly, they store well, and often don't need a vet prescription, which makes actually doing the protocol consistently more practical for people.
Okay, practicality matters.
Yeah.
But none of this works if the dose is off,
Yeah.
right? The sources seemed really emphatic about precision.
Oh, absolutely non-negotiable. Precision is everything here.
Where does that start?
It starts with getting an accurate weight, and they really stress weight in kilograms.
Kilograms, not pounds.
Not pounds. You really need a proper scale, like a digital baby scale is ideal. And you have to do the conversion. Take the weight in pounds and divide it by 2.2 to get kilograms.
Okay, so accurate weight in kilogram is step one. Then there was that formula for figuring out the actual amount of liquid to give.
Yep, there's a specific formula they provide. You take the puppy's weight in kilograms.
Okay.
Multiply that by the required dosage for that specific medication, which
Yep.
is usually given in milligrams per kilogram in GPG. Then you divide that whole result by the concentration of the liquid medicine you're using, which is typically listed on the bottle in milligrams per milliliter, mgml.
Okay, so weight in kg times mg kilo dose divided by mg/ml concentration.
Equals the number of milliliters of mamma you need to draw up and give the puppy.
Let's run through that example they gave, the 4.4-pound puppy.
Sure. So 4.4 pounds divided by 2.2 is exactly 2 kilograms. Let's say the drug needs a 10 millikilogram dose, and the bottle says the liquid concentration is 50 milligram.
Okay.
No, it's 2 kilograms times 10 milligram, which is 20. Then divide that by 50 milligml. So 20 divided by 50 equals 0.4.
0.4 milliml. That's a tiny amount.
It often is, especially for small puppies. And that really highlights why just guessing or using like a kitchen teaspoon is completely out. It's not accurate enough.
Right. What were the practical tips for actually giving the dose?
Always use a properly calibrated oral syringe. You know, the ones without needles marked clearly in ml or cc's. Also, really important, remember that liquid suspensions, the sources mention, Fenbendazole and Toltrazuril specifically, often have the active medicines settle out at the bottom.
Ah, so you need to.
You must shake the bottle really, really well right before you draw up each dose. Otherwise, you might not be getting the right amount of medication.
Good tip. Shape well.
So, yeah, precision in weighing, precision in the calculation, and precision in drawing up and giving the dose. The sources really drive home that underdosing just won't work. You won't kill the parasites effectively.
And overdosing.
Overdosing could potentially cause side effects or problems. Getting that dose right is just vital.
Okay. And speaking of things going wrong, the sources also pointed out some common mistakes, some pitfalls people fall into.
Yes, definitely some key traps to avoid.
What are the big ones?
Number one, probably the most common. Starting the worming process too late.
Late, meaning? after 2 weeks.
Yeah. If you don't start right at 2 weeks, you've missed that critical early window. Remember, they're born with worms from the mother, and those worms multiply incredibly fast in a young puppy. Waiting just puts immense stress on their tiny bodies.
Yeah.
They're already behind the curve.
Right, because the problem's already growing fast.
Yeah.
Okay, starting too late. What else?
Second big error. Sticking to just one type of dewormer forever.
We just talked about that, the resistance issue.
Exactly.
Okay.
Using the same thing over and over basically breeds resistant parasites in your environment. You have to rotate products according to a smart schedule.
Okay, and number 3.
Well, we just covered it, but it bears repeating. Eyeballing doses, trying to guess the amount instead of actually weighing the puppy accurately and doing the calculation.
Leads to under or overdosing. Got it.
Absolutely. It's a recipe for failure or potential harm.
No.
And the final major pitfall they mentioned is not recognizing or treating coccidia separately.
Right, assuming the regular wormer takes care of everything.
Yeah, and it doesn't. Coccidia needs its specific treatment, like the Toltrazuril we mentioned. Ignoring it leaves the puppy suffering from a different, but equally common and nasty parasite.
Okay, those are definitely things to watch out for. So let's say someone, maybe they missed a step, or perhaps the protocol isn't quite working as expected. What are the signs they should look for that might indicate a puppy still has a heavy parasite load?
The sources list several key warning signs, kind of red flags.
Like what?
A really noticeable pot-bellied appearance is a classic sign. Also, started growth, like if one puppy isn't gaining weight like its litter mates.
Oh.
Soft stool, or even seeing blood in the stool. A dull, poor quality coat can be an indicator. Sometimes vomiting.
Can you actually see worms?
Occasionally, yes, you might see worms in the feces or vomit, but that's not always the case. You can definitely have a significant worm burden without ever seeing an adult worm.
Right. Anything else?
Yeah. Excessive scooting, dragging their rear end on the floor, or a lot of scratching back there can sometimes be related too.
Okay, those are pretty clear signs to look out for. And if someone does see those signs, what's the advice?
The advice is to treat immediately, following the appropriate step in the protocol for their age. And then this is crucial follow-up with a second treatment dose 10 to 14 days later.
Why the second dose?
Because the first dose usually kills the adult worms, but it might not kill the eggs or larvae. Those can hatch out after the first treatment. So that second dose, 10-14 days later, is needed to catch those newly hatched worms before they can mature and reproduce. These parasites have fast life cycles.
Got it. Break the cycle. Okay. The sources also seem to touch on some frequently asked questions people have.
Yeah, a couple of common ones came up. One was, can you use dewormer preventatively?
And the answer?
Is basically yes, especially in higher risk situations like if you have multiple dogs or you're in a kennel environment. Regular treatment helps keep the overall parasite pressure down.
Makes sense. How about for adult dogs? Do they need this kind of intense schedule?
Not usually the same puppy schedule, but the recommendation for adults is still regular deworming, often a monthly rotation, especially if they have higher exposure risks.
Like what kind of risks?
Things like eating a raw diet, spending a lot of time digging or eating things in the soil, potential contact with wildlife or their droppings. For adults, something like that monthly MoxiGuard Plus was suggested as a good maintenance option.
Okay. And the question everyone probably asks is eventually, oops, I missed a dose. What do I do?
Yeah, it happens. The advice is pretty straightforward. Just give the missed dose as soon as you remember. Then get right back onto your regular schedule from that point on.
So don't double up. Just give it when you remember and continue as planned.
Exactly. Consistency is the goal, but one missed dose, if you correct it quickly, isn't usually a catastrophe.
Good to know. This material also had some really practical, pro tips from breeders, didn't it? Things that sounded super useful.
Yeah, some simple but really effective habits, like keeping a whiteboard right there, maybe in the whelping room or puppy area, to track the exact dates you wormed each puppy. And critically, their weights on those dates. It just helps keep everything organized and ensures nobody gets missed, especially with a litter.
Smart. Simple but smart.
Another tip was documenting everything. Any reactions a puppy might have, changes in their stool consistency around worming time, anything unusual.
Why is that helpful?
Over time, it helps you build a picture of what's normal for your line of dogs, and you can spot potential issues or patterns much earlier if something changes.
Like tracking data.
Kind of, yeah. And again, emphasizing alternating the types of wormers used, but maybe even keeping a log of which ones you used when and how effective they seemed. That helps manage that resistance issue proactively in your specific environment.
Okay. And there was one more really big one. about the mother dog.
Yes, maybe one of the most impactful tips. Focusing on the dam before the puppies are even born,
How so?
warming her before she's even bred. And then again during her pregnancy, the source specifically mentioned around day 42 of gestation, and then again shortly after she gives birth.
And the point of that is,
It dramatically reduces the number of parasite larvae that she inevitably passes on to her puppies, both in the womb and through her milk. It gives the puppies a much cleaner start, less of a parasite load to fight right from day one.
so tackling the problem at the source, literally.
Exactly. That upstream intervention can make a massive difference for the health of the whole litter.
That's a great tip. Okay, so let's just quickly recap that core puppy protocol sequence one last time, just the main steps from the sources.
Sure. So, nutshell version. Start at 2 weeks old with Pyrantel.
Okay,
Repeat that Pyrantel every 2 weeks. So at 4, 6, and 8 weeks.
got it.
At 10 weeks and again at 12 weeks, switch to Fenbendazole, giving it for 3 consecutive days each time.
3 days, Fenbendazole, 10 and 12 weeks.
Around 14 weeks, do that single cleanup dose of Albendazole.
Okay.
Remember, if coccidia pops up as an issue, you need to treat that separately with Toltrazuril. It's not covered by the Dewormer.
Separate track for coccidia.
Right. And then from 16 weeks onwards, you transition to your chosen monthly broad-spectrum preventative, like the MoxiGuard Plus example, for ongoing maintenance.
Perfect. And the sources did mention a specific place, Toltrazurilshop.com, where people could find these products and also get like a dosing cheat sheet.
Yeah, that was mentioned as a resource for both the products and some extra support, like that schedule guide.
Great. Well, the whole point of this deep dive was really to give you that shortcut, right? To take all this practical knowledge from experienced people and lay out not just the what, but the why behind a solid puppy worming protocol.
Hopefully equipping you with a clear plan and the understanding to, actually implement it effectively for healthy puppies.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of puppy worming.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Mm.
And maybe here's a final thought to chew on, circling back to where we started. If puppies are indeed born with parasites as a sort of natural baseline, what does that fundamental biological reality really tell us about the ongoing, maybe even permanent, relationship between our domestic animals and these internal parasites? Does it suggest that successful management isn't about finding one magic bullet, but maybe requires constant vigilance, a toolbox of different approaches, and accepting it as an ongoing process rather than just a problem to be solved once? Something to think about?